Welcome back to the Speaking and Communicating podcast. I am your host, Roberta. If you are looking to improve your communication skills, both professionally and personally, and to improve overall as a person, this is the podcast you should be listening to. Please remember to subscribe, give a rating, and a review by the end of this episode. Today, I am joined by Yannik Cudjoe-Virgil. He is the principal of Merlin Acquisitions, a private real estate equity firm that helps both athletes, entrepreneurs, and anyone else who's interested in investing and diversifying their portfolio. And before I go any further, please help me to welcome Yannik. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Good to have you here. I've been waiting to speak to someone like you. But before that, please tell our listeners, give us a little bit of your background.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on the show. A little bit about me. My name is Yannik Cudjoe-Virgil. I'm a former linebacker for the Tennessee Titans, turned real estate investor and syndicator. And what I do professionally now after the sport of football is I run a private equity firm. We specialize in acquiring apartment buildings, multifamily, and we help everyday professionals, busy professionals, business owners, people who are looking for an accretive return in real estate to diversify their portfolio. So happy to be on the show today.
I'm glad that you're here. First of all, let's talk about your football career, because that's where a lot of things started. Just give us a little bit on that. How did you get into football? How were you able to be picked, etc.?
So my background came from being an immigrant from Trinidad. I came over here when I was about 10 years old and fell in love with the sport of football. Watched it as a youth. And, fortunately, I was good enough to play college. I played linebacker at the University of Maryland, which is a Division I school. And then fortunately, I got the chance to move on to the NFL, live out my dreams, and play linebacker for the Tennessee Titans. For me, my career ended early. Unfortunately, I had a knee injury that, I had to walk away from the game from. And, it was challenging. This is something that, is being talked about in the professional athlete space of finding a sense of identity outside of the game. Your entire life, you're known as this great athlete. You get a lot of special treatment to some degree for being, an athlete and your skills on the field. But, when the game ends, it's kind of like an identity loss, and so finding the next step for me was certainly not easy, but luckily, I stumbled upon a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yes,
And
yes,
that
yes.
transformed my thinking 100% because the month prior to that, I spent about $20,000 in 1 month and I had no idea what I spent it on. And,
Just
for,
spending the money,
yeah, whether it's, clubs, going out, just
living your
having
best
fun
life.
as a 22-year-old, right? Um, and so for me, that book was very monumental in just my thinking process. At that time, I was rehabbing my knee injury. A lot of changes were happening organizationally with the Titans. And I knew that I had to make a change because I didn't know if I was going to, get healthy again, be able to get back on the field. And so one thing I did not want to do is be a statistic. We've heard, you know, um, 70 something percent of athletes go broke, within 3 years after the league. I think, some of that is changing, but, I did not want to be the statistic of someone who, was able to go to the NFL and go broke. And so for me, reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad was monumental because it taught me about money, finances, and what I'm doing today, real estate. And so that's a little bit about my story and how I got to where I am today.
Mhm. That is testament of how knowledge and books can really change lives. I mean, I think the first time I read Rich Dad Poor Dad was not long after it was released, and Robert Kiyosaki was going on talk shows like Oprah, doing a book tour, and we got the copy back home as well. So back to your football career, how long did you play before the knee injury?
So one season, had a career-ending knee injury my rookie year.
All right. And then, so you played in Maryland in college, but you were drafted by Tennessee.
Yeah, so I went undrafted. I
Mm-hmm.
went as an undrafted free agent to the Tennessee Titans.
Right. And then now you live in Maryland.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So you went back. Is that where your real estate business is based? Or is it
Yes.
national?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So we are currently investing in Baltimore, Maryland, in a market that has historically been a cash flow market. It is it has robust foundations for growth in this market. I'm from here. It's home to me, and so what better way to invest in your community and also get some great compelling returns to invest in Baltimore, Maryland. So that's where all of our properties are located at this time.
Right. And therefore, let's go back to the whole 70% of athletes retiring broke after 3 years. When I've heard these stories all these years, I've always wondered first, what are the reasons? Is it because they give their money to accountants who are scrupulous? I've even heard of Rihanna. She's not an athlete, but I think there was a point where her accountant ran away with $11 million of her money. What do you think is the common thread? Why do we hear so much of these stories?
I think the common thread of, hearing a lot of these stories centers around two things. The first thing is education. And when you think about just the professional athlete space, a lot of those athletes are not educated on finances. And it's something that is changing a lot from, social media programs that are out there to educate the modern day athlete. So I would expect that statistic to swing a little bit in a more positive light. And then the second thing is just how the culture works, in a sense, from being in a circle, being in a fraternity, and one person referring business to the same person, and then the next person referring business to the same person. Athletes do business. No, athletes kind of talk a lot around each other, right? And so
Mhm.
if one person provides services for that athlete, that athlete would recommend that person to that specific person who's providing the service. And so now you have this network of athletes working with this one professional. And that is why you see a lot of headlines where you see, one bad actor involved with a ton of professional athletes because of that network, dynamic that I just mentioned. And so I think, athletes are starting to pay attention more to their finances. They're starting to get more educated on just, overall how to, manage their money and spend their money and invest. And then also, from the network standpoint, people are paying a little bit more attention and doing more due diligence on, that professional that they're hiring. So I think there's some positivity that's coming out of this as we continue to, get these athletes educated.
Right. Okay. Even when we were watching TV back home, we watch cribs, they show the house and then they show the cars.
Mhm.
And I've seen Lamborghinis. There are rich people in South Africa as well with Lamborghinis and Ferraris, you name it. But we used to ask ourselves, why would you have 20 of them in different colors? Isn't one Lamborghini enough to have the feeling of driving a Lamborghini? Why do you think that they do that? That buying of 20 of the same car in different colors?
Yeah, I think to be honest, the best way to kind of think about it is, putting myself in that shoes, right?
Mm.
A lot of the professional athletes, which is predominantly, let's talk about the football space or NBA, predominantly African American, you know, those guys come from impoverished neighborhoods, right?
Mhm.
Those guys come from, being on food stamps. Those guys come from not having the money, right? And so when you go from being a broke college student to what I call an overnight millionaire, and you don't have that foundation, that economic and that financial discipline of what to do with your money, that's a recipe for disaster. And so when you grow up not being able to afford a lot of stuff, and all of a sudden you have millions of dollars, you just start to think about, everything that I can get with this money. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's the sentiment that a lot of athletes have had in the past, or some still do, is that, hey, I'm going to go out there. I worked extremely hard to get to this level. Now I have millions of dollars. And so now I'm going to, buy everything that, I wanted to have as a child, or I want to have today. And so I think that's the reason for that, honestly.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned identity earlier. Do you think it's also attached to that?
I do think that as well. I do think that as well. I think, specifically in the professional athlete space, or even in the entertainer space, there's an identity that you have to somewhat create for yourself, right? Because now you're in a different circle, right? You can't be
Mm-hmm.
driving, you can't be driving a Honda Civic, around, someone who makes millions of dollars, right? I would kind of liken it to just being around your circle, right? People want to do business, or people want to naturally be around people like them, right? And so hanging
Mm-hmm.
around a multimillionaire that's driving a Lamborghini, and you pulling up with a
The
a
Honda.
Toyota a Toyota Camry, it just doesn't make sense here, right? And
Mm.
so it's part of the identity, it's part of the perception, it's part of the culture. And so that's the reason why people go out there and they, the first thing that they probably buy is a car, right? Because they want to be included into that space, that circle, to feel comfortable.
Right. I fully get it. And yes, when you're in the car parking lot of the training camp, you do want to be like everyone else. Now, I remember growing up, when MC Hammer blew up with You Can Touch This.
Mhm.
The one moment he was building this huge house in Oakland, we had no internet back then. So it was on a magazine cover. And then not long after that, he was filing for bankruptcy, and they said he had 80 people on his entourage. He was paying salaries. He had no idea what they were doing around him. What causes that? Because I think some athletes as well would have just these people lingering by you, and that I think that's part of the reason the money goes away. What is it that we do in that sense when we just have these people lingering around us and we don't even know what they do?
Yeah. I think that's interesting, right? Because you grew up with a lot of these folks. Some of them have paid, have helped you get to the next level, right? And I think to some degree, it's a feeling like, hey, you owe them something because you got to this level together, or they contributed some portion of their life towards your success in this particular athletic space. For me, and how I think about it is, um, it's kind of like, when they say on like on an airplane, right? If something
Mhm.
happens, you put the life jacket on yourself before helping
First.
someone else, right?
Yeah.
And for me, that has always been my motto, even when I was playing professionally, is making sure that I'm taken care of first and foremost, myself and my family, my parents, that's important to me. And then everybody else gets the leftover, right? Because the truth of the matter is that, in the sport of football, professional athletes, professional athletics, there's a lot of time and energy being placed on just perfecting your craft, and making sure that your body is performing in the optimized level that it needs to go out there and actually play to keep your job, right?
Hmm.
And so for me, um that was my number one focus, was making sure that my family's taken care of, I'm taken care of. Because the reality is, I'm the only one that's actually going out there to do the work, right? Nobody's out there
Right.
taking the hits, nobody's out here dealing with the injuries, nobody's out here um dealing with the pressures from performance and having to keep your job. And so I think that's how I approach the situation. And
Hmm.
I think, more athletes are starting to pay attention to, um, how important that is to put that life jacket on first and taking care of yourself first, and not necessarily, sponsoring sponsoring someone else's lifestyle on your dime. I
Hmm.
think, the modern day athlete is definitely um, more focused on, taking care of themselves in today's world. So things are definitely changing.
That's good to hear. Charity certainly does begin at home. You take care of yourself first, like you said with the airplane analogy, before you take care of others. Now,
Absolutely.
I watched, this was a very sad episode. There's a new series documentary called Rich and Shameless. And
Okay.
one of the episodes, I don't know if you remember him, but he was Brian Williams. He played for the Chicago Bulls in the early 90s. It was around the Jordan era.
Okay.
And they used to call him, you had Jordan, you had Pippen, and then him, Brian Williams. Oh, okay. Okay, Dennis Rodman first, and then Brian Williams. And then he changed his name to Bison Diller for those who might have remembered him much later, with a different name change. When I watched that episode, Shaq was one of the people they interviewed. And Shaq spoke about how he was so savvy with his money back in the early 90s when these stories were more
Hmm.
common. I think he had a little car, one house, and a boat. He loved being in the ocean. And unfortunately, that's where he was discovered. That's where he passed. But Shaq said, I used to look at this guy and think, he only has one car. I had 20 Lamborghinis in my driveway. So, I remember him saying, Bison Diller was more the exception than the norm
Hmm.
in how he handled his finances. He didn't blow up his money on all the flashy stuff. And it's good to hear that you're saying that's becoming more the norm than the exception.
Yeah. No, I think with the, inclusion of social media, having access to, financial advice at the palm of your fingertips. We have role models out there like LeBron James, who is doing
Mm,
exceptionally well off the field. You see the things that he's doing in business. I think he just became the first athlete billionaire.
right.
His for his
Yes.
investments and things like Blaze Pizza and his partnerships. He is arguably the model athlete in today's environment, right? Everyone is
Mhm.
looking to model his moves. When we talk about the late great Kobe Bryant and things that he did off the field as well,
Another
you know,
billionaire. Yes.
exactly. People
Mhm.
are modeling, the greats, right? And as I
Magic is a
mentioned,
billionaire. Yes. Uh-huh.
yeah, and as I mentioned, athletes tend to follow other athletes. Once you see one person do one thing, the next athlete is going to likely do the same thing.
Right.
And so that's all we really needed was being able to expose the athletes to, what they should do, the model athlete, and then also, what's good for them as well in the long
Mhm.
term for them and their families. So things are definitely changing, as I mentioned. Yeah.
Right. Now let's talk about Merlin Acquisitions. How did you get started on that?
So for me, as I mentioned, I when I got injured, for me, I had to figure out what was the next move. And Rich Dad Poor Dad opened my mindset to just finances, money, and real estate. So I got into real estate because I wanted the same financial freedom to some respect that I had when, I was playing in the NFL. And I think that anyone out there can achieve financial freedom through real estate investing. And how I define financial freedom is simply just having enough free cash flow to offset your everyday expenses, because that's essentially what the average worker in America is working for, right? Is to earn
Mm-hmm.
earn a living, right? To pay their bills, take care of their children, take care of their
Mm-hmm.
family. And so real
Please.
estate is one of those opportunities. I'm sorry.
Sorry to interrupt your career.
Sorry. Yeah, so real estate is one of those investments where you can take small amounts of capital and just compile that over time to build a real estate portfolio and create the financial freedom for you and your family. And so for me, real estate was the perfect opportunity to leverage my experience in the sports space from being able to manage teams, because real estate is a team sport. You have to
Mm-hmm.
have different players on your team to be successful in real estate. It's not a one person show. right? So being able to, find the right professionals to be successful is a skill that everyone needs to have when they're investing in real estate. So for me, it was an opportunity to, invest in an appreciating asset that, provides cash flow to create financial freedom for myself. So that's how I got into real estate.
You created your own cash flow quadrant.
Exactly. That's another Robert Kiyosaki,
Yes.
mantra.
The reason I was interrupting you, I wanted to ask you to define financial freedom the way you do again. Please do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So financial freedom in the simplest form is having enough free cash flow to offset your everyday expenses. And my background as well is I used to work for a couple of private equity firms. And so, I quit my job by having enough free cash flow from my rental portfolio to offset what I was being paid, in the, let's call it the W-2 space, right? Being an everyday working professional. And so, that is what I define financial freedom as.
It's not a very common definition. And the reason I asked, because a lot of, like we were talking about shiny object syndrome earlier, a lot of these online, let me coach you into financial freedom, always talk about you're going to be in the Maldives, you're going to make the kind of money you could win in the lottery. And that's what they define as financial freedom. And that's what people take in. So I really like the way you put it, because it means, one, it's attainable. It's not for only special people if they really do and implement the methods. Because I feel like sometimes people, when they hear these other shiny object syndrome definitions of financial freedom, it looks unattainable for most people.
Yeah. I think if anyone is looking for a get rich quick scheme, that is a recipe for disaster, right?
Right.
I haven't seen much, get rich quick opportunities out there that actually help people get rich quick, right? And I think with, to your point of the $30,000 programs and things that are out there, the biggest thing that I would look for is just performing due diligence on that person. Because for me, one thing for me, I would agree that, value is something that depends on what you think of it, right? And what it has, what it can offer you. And so if you feel like that 30,000 would create that value that you're looking for, definitely do the due diligence on that person. Try to get, reviews from anyone that's in, that program. And if someone is unable to provide, referrals or people who can, give healthy reviews that have actually gone through their process, look the other way and run fast, because that is something that, if you're selling a product that costs $30,000, I definitely need to have some surety that there's, a route to get that outcome, the outcome that I'm looking for. Right. So, yeah, definitely do your due diligence 100%.
Or something of value that is worth more than the 30,000 I paid you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So are you familiar with the app Clubhouse?
Yes.
I remember, I don't get into all the rooms, obviously, but I remember sometimes just when you read the topics, the headlines of what they're discussing, I've seen quite a few of the ones that say $3,000, get started on real estate investing. Is that realistic or is that a scam?
Honestly, I honestly think it's some might be, obviously antics and can appear somewhat scammy just to try to drive attention to it and people to come into those rooms. But then I also think there are also opportunities out there to, buy properties for discounted prices. Now, obviously, realistically, let's say, somewhere like Detroit, where the market is it's much, maybe softer, or you can get cheaper properties out there, is somewhere where you may be able to buy something for $3,000, and obviously it might be dilapidated, versus a New York property where you can't, you can't even get a piece of dirt for that, right?
$3,000.
You know, there are opportunities out there where you can get properties for $3,000-$5,000, and those opportunities might be in, you know, tax liens, right? Buying tax liens from your city, you know, getting equitable interest in that property through tax liens, you know, and going through the foreclosure process to actually acquire the property. There are opportunities out there to you know, buy properties, so to speak, at, you know, those discounted prices. It just comes down to the strategy. It just comes down to, you know, realistic expectations on that particular strategy. And you know, at the end of the day, you know, real estate is one of those things where, you know, value you know, appreciates over time. And so um you know, to wrap it up, yes, there are opportunities out there where you can get properties, or, you know, have a chance to acquire properties for that low buy-in entry.
Mm-hmm. So when you say overtime, that means back to no getting rich quick scheme. Real estate is an investment that is got long-term, will give you long-term financial freedom. So you can't expect to suddenly quit your job a month later after investing with Merlin Acquisitions.
Absolutely. It's you know, for us, you know, our investors are busy professionals, you know, everyday, you know, people who are out there maybe working a job and, you know, have money in the bank that they're looking to diversify from the stock market, right? The reason I like real estate is because of the predictability of returns and outcome as well, versus the stock market, where one day you might be up and then you have, you know, a politician that says something, or the company, you know, their sales go down and all of a sudden, you know, you drop 10%. Whereas in real estate, you know, there's more empirical data to um, show exactly what you're going to get in that specific product. And then the cash flow as well is something that, you know, comes every month, specifically in residential real estate. I'm sure that you've been aware of the housing market across the country. You know,
Mm-hmm.
supply is extremely constrained. People, you know, can't afford to buy homes. The starter home price has gone up about, you know, 28% or so within the past, you know, 12 months. And so people can't afford to buy a house in today's environment. And so they're forced to rent. And so the demand for rentals, apartments that we look for, is extremely robust for the foreseeable future, just because of that supply and demand imbalance that's out there in the market right now. So, you know, we love real estate. It has done well for us, and we're going to continue to bring opportunities to, for, you know, our investors, and grow our wealth together.
Mm-hmm. Actually, the what you just mentioned with the supply and demand of real estate right now, I have a friend who is a real estate agent, and he says they don't have enough stock on the list for rentals.
Mm,
More people are looking for places. There, this is Chicago. Can you imagine how many apartments we have? But there's not enough for them to cater to people who are looking for rentals. That's very interesting.
yeah, yeah. It's you know, the US is in a housing crisis. I mean, during the last recession, we halted, you know, home building. And so there's millions of houses that are in backlog just because people are looking for homes, and we just haven't been able to keep up with the demand for the past 10 years. And so, you know, during the pandemic, it just exacerbated you know, the housing pressures that we've had prior to the pandemic, because of, you know, essentially the natures behind the pandemic. People wanted to move out of small confined areas and get, you know, into single family properties. We had low interest rates that, you know, when you have low interest rates out there in the market, that's always a key ingredient for investing. And
Mm-hmm.
so people are able to afford way more than they would otherwise prior to the pandemic. And so housing prices, you know, skyrocketed. And so, you know, when you take a look at where housing prices is compared to wage growth and some of those other economic factors that are out there, there's a huge imbalance. And so the my outlook is that it's going to be extremely difficult to get a starter home for the foreseeable future, unless the government starts to maybe subsidize you know, first time home buyers to be able to get into those properties, and also help investors, you know, build more efficiently, and, you know, subsidize cost on just development costs as well.
Right.
The other thing that people don't know about is that institutional companies, big private equity firms who have historically invested in commercial real estate, apartment buildings, et cetera, they are now buying up single family homes. When you take a look at stories like Zillow, what happened with them and their, investment in single family homes that collapsed, and other institutional players who are investing in this, about 2% of single family homes in America today are owned by institutional companies. The rest are owned by what we call mom and pop operators, right? Or just your everyday Americans.
Family,
But if we
yes.
have, but now we have this influx of capital that's coming into the single family space because of such demand, that's attributing as well to the rise in prices. And when you think about the overall wealth of your everyday American, much of their wealth is tied into their homes. And so that's another, paradigm that we are, looking at right now, is what is going to happen with the wealth and, the ability for someone to buy a home in America today. So there are a lot of things that are impacting the demand for rental housing, and, it's something that's something to look at and to pay attention to, in today's environment.
Does Merlin Acquisitions also invest in commercial real estate?
Yep. So apartments, anything that is 5 units and more is considered commercial. And so that's what we do. We are commercial real estate investors, and we buy these apartments that we can create revenue from and renovate and increase the rents to provide a consistent return for our investors.
Okay. If I'm allowed to ask this question, your clientele, what's the income bracket? Where do you start? Or should somebody listen to you and say, oh, I don't have the kind of money that athletes make, so obviously I cannot invest in this firm?
So our most of our investors are, business owners, busy professionals, people who are in their careers and, maybe have, a nice sum amount in the stock market and looking to diversify. So a lot of times when you get into, these private equity investments, the minimums can range from maybe 30,000 to 100,000, depending on the size of the deal. And so that's the great thing about, what we do is syndications, right? And just in the simplest form is basically, we use the SEC laws to provide opportunities for everyday professionals to invest in. And so the beauty of that is being able to bring real estate opportunities to investors who would not be able to see these deals without having structures that the government has put in place to allow everyday people to invest in institutional quality assets. Because historically, prior to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, a lot of those opportunities were just for high net worth investors because, you see these deals in small, close-knit communities.
Right.
So being able to have a structure where you can go out there and find, anyone that is, a regular, maybe a business owner, W-2 worker, or even a professional athlete to invest in with you is something that we are happy to do because we provide tax benefits, cash flow, and, we help people generate wealth through real estate.
So you do all the due diligence, the hard work, the behind the scenes digging of all this information, which a busy professional or entrepreneur doesn't have time to do, obviously.
Exactly. We are the operators. We handle everything from start to finish. And, our job for our investor is just to collect the check.
What a nice way to live. Just collecting checks.
Right, exactly.
Right, which I'm sure, like you described, financial freedom. That is what we're all aiming for, to not be slaves to our jobs. And speaking of jobs, with the Great Resignation in the last 2 years with COVID, I don't know if you're familiar with Simon Sinek. He talks about leadership. His latest book is called The Infinite Game.
Okay.
So he says a lot of people were stuck in miserable jobs, thinking I need it for my mortgage and to feed my kids. I'll deal with this horrendous boss, but I have to do this. And then COVID happened. lots of people lost their jobs or they resigned. That's why
Mhm.
they call it the Great Resignation. And now they're saying, okay, do I really want to go back to that miserable job? We survived the worst pandemic ever in my era, and
Yeah.
I'm still here. Usually, miserable job or no job, you take the miserable job for my mortgage, for my kids. But
Yeah.
now I think I survived without the miserable job. I'm not going back there.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think, to your point with the great resignation, people had a lot of time to sit back and think about, their future. There were a lot of opportunities out there to invest in. People had more money from just the stimulus packages that were being pumped into the economy, which obviously has led to the inflation issue that we're dealing with today. And so, when you have that a lot of time, I mean, that's what employees don't want, right?
Mm,
They want people to just work.
yeah.
They don't
So
want you to
the
have
power
time on
has
your hands.
shifted.
Exactly. They don't want you to get smarter. The US is not in the business of producing entrepreneurs, and that's a different, conversation for another day, talking about educational curriculums and, as a youth, getting to your adult state. But employers don't want employees to have a bunch of time on their hands, right? And so I think, with the stimulus money that was in the economy, people investing and paying attention to other opportunities that would allow them to make money likely had some sort of impact on the great resignation, right? And people
Mm.
wanting to have flexibility and being able to control their futures and their outcome. And that's essentially what, making investments can do and entrepreneurship can do. So yeah, it was an interesting time for the past, 12 to 24 months.
Oh, yes. Certainly a lot of reflecting and thinking, do I really want to do this? Which people didn't have time for before.
Yeah.
So, Yannik, tell us when it comes to Merlin Acquisitions, what is it? Basically, tell our listeners if they want to invest, what are the criteria that they should meet in order to know whether they qualify to even be part of your clientele?
Yes. So for us, we enjoy bringing, passive opportunities to our investors. And I would say our client is someone who or anyone who is looking for a diversified return in real estate, who's looking for something more predictable, who is looking to utilize the tax benefits that real estate offers to offset some of their business income or other passive income that they have. Um, and our clients are just everyday people. We don't necessarily have any stringent criteria. Obviously we don't want anyone to invest their their last dime into an investment opportunity. You never want to invest anything that you aren't prepared to lose, in a sense. But for us, it's about bringing quality cash flowing opportunities to our investors to help them achieve the wealth goals that they want for themselves and their family. And again, we talk about financial freedom and we talk about creating your own destiny. And real estate is the perfect opportunity to do that as well. So we enjoy doing what we do. And, I'm happy to speak with anyone that's out there looking for any passive real estate investing opportunities.
Please define financial freedom again. I like it.
And so financial freedom is just having enough income to offset your everyday expenses to create the lifestyle that you want and not have to worry about, going to work every day.
I like that, which is a dream that most of us have. So before you go, please tell us where to reach you and where we get all the information on how to get started on real estate.
Absolutely, absolutely. So our website, again, our company is Merlin Acquisitions, and our website is simply Merlin, Merlynn, acquisitions.com. And on there, we have an ebook, how to get started in real estate, why multifamily is a great investment opportunity. We have educational resources like a due diligence checklist if anyone is out there looking for their own real estate opportunities, specifically in multifamily. And, if anyone is interested, feel free to join our investor group to get more information about the opportunities that we have for our company. So thank you so much for having me on this platform. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for being here. I was educated on this topic. One last question. Remember the 2008 financial crisis?
Yep.
Do the principles taught in Rich Dad Poor Dad, could they apply to those situations, or it was just bad all around because of what Wall
Yeah,
Street did?
absolutely. Absolutely. I think, and just for anyone that doesn't know what exactly happened in the last financial crisis, basically it all centered around the lenders issuing a bunch of bad loans in a sense, right? And people were able to, I mean, you can get up tomorrow and buy a house. And so, that obviously when you're issuing a bunch of bad loans out there in the market and people can't afford it, that's a recipe for disaster. And so, the principles in Rich Dad Poor Dad definitely can help you navigate through just understanding investing basics and fundamentals, right? Why you need to, why you need to invest in the right market, why you need to invest in an asset that's, appreciating, why you need to not over leverage yourself in real estate. Um, and so I think, the last financial crisis was something that is, maybe an anomaly, right? Because it was a situation where the government just issued a bunch of bad loans. But I think in today's economy, where we are today, lending requirements are much more stringent. And the dynamics behind the housing market today is much more stronger than it is back then. Again, we have been underbuilding for the past 10 years. And so I don't see any sort of, real estate crash happening for the foreseeable future, but more so rather a correction at best, right? Because at some point the market has to to stabilize. And
Correct itself,
we can't
balance
have
itself.
exactly we can't have $20,000 over asking here, $50,000 over asking there, just continuously happening, right? It's not healthy for any market. And so I would expect the real estate market as a whole to stabilize with also knowing that not all locations are created equal, but as a real estate market as a whole, I would expect some sort of stabilization because rates have gone up, et cetera. So between the last real estate cycle, last financial crisis versus now, two different situations. And the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, great way to get some foundational knowledge on just the principles of investing in real estate.
Thank you very much, Yannik Cudjoe-Virgil, for being here today.
Thank you.
If you've been listening, I'm sure that you know exactly what to do to get started. Go to merlinacquisitions.com in order to know how to get started on real estate investing. And if you have met the minimum criteria, at least, of investing in real estate, but don't have the time, you're a busy athlete or entrepreneur, please contact Yannick's company in order to get started and diversify your portfolio. Thank you very much.